Hi, this is Jacqueline Reeves, and I'm a diversity and inclusion and intercultural specialist, and I created this content. And today, I am here with Masami Kanaguri, my partner, and we are here to talk about COVID-19, Zoom, Amazon, Facebook, and Google, views of big tech from Germany, US, and Japan, part one of a three-part webinar. So Masami, you and I have been working together on this content for a while. Tell me what you do.
Yes, now I'm currently living in Munich in Germany, and I'm doing consulting work for organizational development and human resource development. Yeah, I'm Japanese, I'm from Japan, and yeah, mainly supporting Japanese companies to well integrate their subsidiaries to European culture and working culture and European people. Yeah.
And so you and I met and we found out we had some mutual interests, and especially when we started talking about working online and concerns that people and companies have about working online. And then we started talking about some of the research that we'd looked at and some of the things that people are aware of or not aware of, and we decided we wanted to do more together. If you look at this slide, this is kind of just a big flashpoint picture of different things that represent conflict in the online world. And if you have a look, you can see maybe some faces that you recognize, some logos that you recognize. Masami, as working with Japanese companies, is there one of these that for you is especially really jumps out at you as something very important for the group that you're working with?
Well, I just recognize the face, the kind of serious face of the Prime Minister Merkel.
Yeah.
Holding the mobile phone.
Yeah, that's the mobile phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, there's the logo of Benesse, which is the Japanese education, maybe education company.
Yeah, if you think about that Merkel picture, the reason that that is an important picture is because the US government actually tapped into her cell phone for a while, and that was resulted in a huge loss of trust between the governments of Germany and the US. And especially this was when Obama was actually president, who was supposed to be kind of the big ally for Europe and especially Germany. So this caused a lot of tension between the two countries. So that's just one example of how different countries might respond differently to how much information we're sharing. Okay, but also on the picture you can see the Twin Towers from 9/11. That probably has changed a lot of perspectives on how people share data and how they feel comfortable sharing data or who they feel comfortable sharing data with. Also in the left-hand corner, Edward Snowden. Everybody probably knows a little bit about him now too, that he worked with The Guardian, the New York Times, and the Spiegel magazine to release thousands and thousands of top secret classified files, and is now living in Moscow because he cannot return home because the Americans want to put him on trial for treason. Okay, so if we break down that slide a little bit, we can ask some key questions that I developed in the research that I did with the Berlin School of Economics. And one of the indicator questions that seemed to be strong was the question about the webcam on your computer. So one thing we asked everybody is, do you cover your webcam with something to protect your privacy? And we found out there's very strong preferences for this globally. Masami, what about the group of people you're working with?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question because, yeah, this is something I never thought about. You know, I never protected, the webcam with the sticker or something. But yes, I'm living in Germany after 1.5 years now. I see more people doing that. So in the beginning, I was like, okay, what's going on? Because this is something we don't really see in Japan.
Yeah. I think there's parts of the US that are becoming more sensitive to issues like this, but in general, this would not be something you would do. But it is something you see with Germans quite often, is they'll put a piece of tape or they'll put a little cover on their webcam to make sure that nobody's controlling it remotely, that nobody's surveilling them from some sort of internet source that they have no contact to. There's a lot of feeling about what that could be, but at any rate, whether that's a concrete piece of information or not, a lot of people want to have that covered, okay? So yeah, this gets into talking about sort of just what are our default behaviors dealing with privacy and security. So on that note, we can go along to the integrator question number 2, which also it seemed people answered in very different ways, and you can create maybe a scale that shows where people feel about this. But the question number 2 is, how much information do you share? So if you look at Facebook, you can see with different cultural groups, you'll see different amounts of how much people post and share and how personal it gets. And with the Americans, they tend to be very, very, they stick out a mile on how much information they share in a very public realm where they have very little information about who's actually viewing their information. Okay. And pretty much almost every group of people I work with, they notice this about the Americans, but I would say maybe especially with the Germans, because they tend to not use that news feed very much at all. They do use the invitation settings and the messenger to send private messages, but not a lot of public postings for everybody to comment on, joke about, YouTube videos, things like that. Very low level of usage on Facebook. So Masami, what about the group that you are working with?
Yeah, so if I talk about Japan's value about sharing information, so as we can see in this slide, yeah, I think, yeah, most Japanese people are, in general, share less verbally. When you communicate face to face, people share less. However, you know, deep inside of their mind, that there's a incentive that they want to share everything. That's how I see the people, including me. So, for example, if we are working, like during the working hours, yeah, maybe you could imagine that, you know, if you have experience in discussing with Japanese business person, you might have experienced, if you're not, I'm just assuming that if you as non-Japanese people, you know, have experienced that they don't say much things, you know, they don't communicate, they don't express their opinions. But, you know, there's a lot of hidden, you know, information in that communication. For example, the speed of the talking and also the intonation and where they are looking at, what kind of face expression they are making, you know, adding a lot of non-verbal, you know, expressions, and they are sharing a lot of things in there.
Okay. So you have to have the key to unlock those messages, right?
Exactly. The first step is they're sharing a lot, but you should be able to, you know, understand where the information is and what kind of rules there are.
Do you think Facebook and social media in general are advantageous places for Japanese when they're sharing information? Does it work well with their style?
Yeah, yes, definitely. Yeah, Japanese community, there, you know, there are so many people who actively use social networks, and I think this is kind of the implication that Japanese want to share many things and be connected with people. But maybe because of more like strict working environment, like work is work and privacy is privacy, you know, there's kind of distinct. So yeah, SNS is really, yeah, pretty much used.
Okay, I'm going on now, and I want to just give a general overview of 3 ways of looking at internet and internet behavior globally. And this is from a New York Times article where they just kind of painted a big, broad picture of the different ways of looking at things. And they put things into the American perspective, the European perspective, and the Chinese perspective. So the American perspective is really all about freedom of speech, which is what our next webinar is going to be about, and the role that freedom of speech plays in how much I post online and what are my expectations of how my information will be treated. Okay. And then you have the European perspective, which is more highly regulated. It's more about citizen privacy rights. So the default behavior is going to be protecting privacy rather than expectation of how things will be handled when they're in the public realm. And the other is the Chinese model, which is more about censorship from that high level view where the government is deciding what websites are seen. In fact, Facebook isn't allowed in China. They have their own social media for everything. But so they're making those decisions at a very high level about what people will have access and not. So very different ideas of freedom of speech, citizen privacy rights, and government oversight or decision making. Okay. What about you, Masami? Where do you see Japan within this continuum?
In terms of internet, we follow American internet browsers. Most people use Google Chrome and Internet Explorers. These all come from the US, and we haven't even thought about whether there's EU version or whether there's Chinese version. Yeah, as far as I know, yeah, or I just think that myself. I'm not internet expert, but I'm a heavy internet user, and then I don't see whether there's any special things coming from China or EU.
Okay. Well, to get a little bit of a closer look, we can talk about some of the conflict pieces that really are sensitivity pieces in Germany, where there have been really strong reactions. And one is the right to be forgotten, which is an EU initiative, but it actually is feeling very strong in Germany, although other European countries also, especially France, are very strong on privacy as well. But the right to be forgotten is all about freedom and access to information, whereas here the idea is that people should have the right to take information out of the internet that is harmful to them personally. Okay, so this is a very sensitive issue here. More recently, we have Zoom that became a huge phenomenon when the virus started going around, and we see our world changing so much right now. We can't really even begin to imagine how much of the platforms and online thinking is even going to change, because we have so much work moving online for me and for you too. I know that, Masami. But thinking of Zoom, especially because Zoom is a very friendly platform, very user-friendly. We're using it right now. But they also had serious security holes in their platform, and I've now been having people jump in on their sessions. It's called Zoom bombing, and now people are passing around tips on dealing with Zoom bombing. But what this means is that even though Zoom is really user-friendly, really easy to get into, a lot of companies and a lot of people are now pulling away from Zoom, and on a global level. But again, all of this sensitivity generally starts in Europe and especially in Germany. And in Germany now, they've already started introducing regulation to regulate the use of Zoom. So this is very interesting. You'll see regulation as a solution in a lot of these situations, where in the US, regulation will go into health services and some individual rights, but you won't see that so much on this blanket right. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our time together. We've given an overview of American, German, and Japanese points of view on big tech and all of these very large companies that we are using every day. The whole point of this kind of an exercise is to understand where you and the people you're working with can better deal with the situations that are going to come up, to strategize, and to understand how to better work with other people based on their sensitivities and where the conflict might start online. So if you enjoyed this webinar, we hope you come back. At the end of the film, there's a link. Go in and click on the link and you can register for the next webinar. We'll send you a notification of when it's out. This will all be about the idea of freedom of speech on a global level. We will discuss how that has influenced the way people see the internet, the way they want to use the internet, and the amount of regulation and the amount of information sharing that they'll expect. So thank you very much for coming today. At the end of this slide, you'll also find resources to learn more about this topic, films, TV shows, books. I've included a little bit of everything in there. Some of it's fun, some of it's a little bigger. I hope you enjoy. Thank you very much.